Hi, so today I'd like to discuss how we talk about aging, especially the language we use. Because we often hear comments such as, you still look really youthful for your age, or you're so active even in your 70s. And I think these comments are all meant to be kind and genuine and reassuring. But if we listen closely, there's a subtle message suggesting that being younger would still be better. Right? There are certain keywords which give it away that youth is the anchor point. For example, words like still, as in you still look good, or even in your 70s. Or my favorite one is for your age, right? You're still very fit for your age. And these are all either comparisons against youth, or they're in some ways trying to downplay or soften the aging process. And so in our everyday conversations, aging is still framed merely as a declining process rather than a process of change, right? We talk about wrinkles, forgetfulness, stiffness and decline, but we rarely talk about what actually grows with age, like a sense of clarity, calm or perspective, seeing the bigger picture and actually gaining time to structure our days the way we want to. So I'd like to invite you into a simple thought experiment that might just change the way you see aging. Now imagine this. You are born at the age of 100. Okay, this may sound a bit optimistic, but in a society where life expectancy is rising, not entirely impossible. So you arrive on this planet fully formed at 100 years old. And I really want you to imagine yourself how you may look like as a 100-year-old person. Right? For example, your body is slower, maybe you're using a walking stick or a Zimmer frame or maybe even a wheelchair. Your skin is thin, your joints ache, you're wearing glasses, hearing aids, and anything else to support your mobility or to keep your senses intact. However, your mind is filled with experience, you speak slowly but thoughtfully, you know yourself, right? You've got great self-awareness and a capacity and a confidence to say no firmly to things that just don't fit. And you've got wisdom and memories and clarity about what really matters in life. So this is how you start out. And with each year, you're getting younger. Right? So by the time you turn 90, your posture starts to improve and your hands are a bit steadier. At 80, you notice how your physical strength slowly increases and you no longer need the Zimmer frame to hold on to. And also your general mobility starts to improve. But then you start to notice how your days begin to fill up, right? And busyness starts to creep in. For example, your mind is set to reading newspapers diligently, tending to the garden or other DIY projects. Or perhaps you volunteer to distribute the village newsletter. And occasionally, you actually start reflecting on the calm stillness that once felt so natural during your late 80s and 90s. Now, by your 70s, you're quite independent of most of the physical aids that you once needed. But life is even noisier now, right? So your calendar fills up with coffee catch-ups, book clubs, volunteering, weekend trips, family visits, and so on. And you feel a subtle pressure to stay engaged, to keep up, right? The quiet moments are fewer and sometimes you actually quite miss them. Now, at 60, life is really busy. You may actually still be working and family often needs your support as well, whether it's helping your own children or watching the grandkids. You often engage in social invitations and there's a kind of a steady rhythm to your days. Certainly very different from when you were in your 80s and had more time to yourself. Now at 50, people expect you to be in your prime, right? You're now managing your career, your adolescent children, your aging parents, maybe a mortgage, and there is barely time to catch your breath. And at 40, your body is more capable. But everyone else around you looks younger too, which means there is a sense of pressure to stay fit and to look good. You know, you start caring for the clothes you wear and making sure you go to the gym regularly so you can keep up with everybody. So now there is a competition and a comparison that you didn't know of when you were older, where these things were not so relevant. By 30, you are proving yourself. You're building your life, possibly raising small children, and your free time disappears. You miss the slow mornings that you once had when you were older, the thoughtful pace, the lack of pressure that you once experienced. And at 20, well, your skin is clear, your energy is endless, but your identity and your confidence are quite uncertain, right? You do not yet know what you stand for and who you want to be, but in a sense you feel pulled in so many directions, right? Which career will I have? Shall I get married? Should I have kids? And you feel watched all the time. Everybody's just waiting for you to grow up and make decisions and commitments. Now, by the time you reach 10, you are dependent again, right? Your parents or caretakers or grandparents make decisions for you. You lose control over your life. You've got to go to school, do the homework when you get home, and then straight after you go to clubs in the afternoon, football, tennis, playing the piano. Kids these days are really busy, and so are their parents, right? So you're largely leading a life that's designed by other people, even though they might have the best intentions for you. And then finally, at the end of this backward life, you are a newborn again, full of potential, which is great. However, you now no longer have the wisdom, the clarity, and the self-knowledge that you once had at the beginning when you were 100 years old. Now, I think this exercise reveals something subtle but very powerful. The point from which we view life, whether we start out at old or young age, really shapes what feels familiar and what we come to value. If we start from old age, we become familiar with this kind of rhythm, right? The calm, the clarity, the confidence, and we appreciate the time we have to reflect and the deeper self-awareness, the ability to say no without any guilt. And these become your reference points, and we begin to miss them as we imagine us moving backwards. But if we start from youth, which of course is the usual way, we all start out as young adults, we tend to remember the energy and the beauty and the zest for life we once possessed, and then that becomes our anchor. But then we often forget the rest of it, right? The stress, the uncertainty, the difficulty to speak up, to stand our ground, and the pressure we experience to fit in. Right? It is in our human nature that we tend to hold on to the positives and the highlights and kind of forget about the more challenging aspects in the past. And this is why it's important to sometimes shift the anchor, identifying the strengths of older age while also recognizing the limitations of youth. And I think that shift could completely reframe our values and possibly influence the values we hold in our society. So here is my invitation to you. Next time someone shares something about getting older, don't rush into reassuring them with, oh, you look great for your age. Instead, ask them, what are you enjoying these days? What are you looking forward to? Because these kinds of questions shift the focus from appearance to experience. And they open the door to sort of more richer conversations. So the more we do this, the more we chip away at the stigma of aging, and the more we begin to see it as a season that is rich with possibility. So I hope you've enjoyed this thought exercise and this reflection. If it gave you a new perspective, or maybe just made you smile, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel as well, or perhaps share it with someone who might need to hear a more hopeful take on growing older. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you soon.